Good day, everyone. WNY Coaches Chalk Talk. My name is Rich Jacob. I'm here with Blair Lipsitz and Joe Schaefer. We're back together. We're forming a team here, my friends, and it's so great to have both of you here today. I do want to start today with a moment of silence for Miguel Rodriguez, one of the writers, a high school advocate, great sports writer for the Buffalo News. He has passed on, so we'll start today's podcast with a moment of silence for Miggy. Thank you. And he certainly was a tremendous writer, an awesome advocate. He raised the level, the presence of high school sports here in Western New York, and he will be missed. Okay, today's topic: peak performance. Is there really a peak? Is there really a top of your game? And as I do, oftentimes I like to hand it over to Coach Blair Lipsitz to start us off.
Thanks for that. We were having this conversation the other day in one of our training sessions, which will be available online soon. Just a little note there on westernnewyorkcoaches.com. But we were talking about peak performance in an overview setting, and all you said was, do you ever really reach the peak? And immediately when you said that line, I said, we got to make this a podcast, because there's so much that can go into what peak performance is. It's something that coaches are always looking for their athletes, but I think we can also talk about it from a coaching point of view. You know, what does that mean? What's peak performance? How do you not only get your athletes there, but how do you keep yourself there? Because anybody that's coached knows you're going to have a lot of ups and a lot of downs and a lot of 5-hour walks, and in my experience, trying to figure stuff out. And so it just seemed like a topic that we needed to bring in.
So true, and there's a lot that you just said there, Coach. How do you get there? How do you stay there? Mm-hmm. And maybe, Joe, we could start to talk about the components, the pieces of the puzzle for peak performance. Again, Joe is an attorney, but also a major college athlete, tennis star, and unbelievable gentleman who's immersed in sport. And again, we're happy to have you here.
Thanks, Coach. Thanks for having me. Again, it's awesome that this is I look forward to this every month, and hopefully you guys don't kick me out. I think I did a better job I guess I got to ask all the questions last time, so I didn't take up as much airtime as I usually do. But now I guess I'm getting asked questions again, so I'll do my best to keep it tight. I think the way I would start and by the way, thank you for that very humbling introduction. I'm sitting across from
He's really good at the humbling introductions.
Oh my gosh, I'm sitting across from a 4-time national champion, and I'm the star tennis player.
Don't put it on me. Don't put it on me.
That's great.
I think the way that I would start this, and don't let me direct the conversation, but the way I would at least frame this is the expectation around peak performance. Maybe we can hack it down from there, because I was thinking about this on the car ride over, and one of my favorite coaching techniques that I use with my 12-year-old top 10 in the country tennis player is...
I was just going to say very high level.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing incredibly well, excelled early on, and I was thinking about, framing his mentality that we don't have to make every ball, that every miss isn't the end of the world. And he's starting to really kind of catch on to it. And I think I'm giving myself a tiny bit of credit here of the conversation of, look, Mikey, I can count on one hand the amount of times that I think I played my absolute best in my 4-year college career. Mm-hmm. And 3 of them were in practice.
Right.
Right.
It's so true. You have those practices where, in volleyball, you go to hit something and you're like, oh my gosh, I can do no wrong. And there's no reason for it. My swing isn't better. I'm not necessarily more dialed in. It's just like one of those days where, you talk about flow and you talk about immersion in the now, and you know that about yourself. When you go into those matches or those practices and you start hitting the ball and it's going off the blocker's hands, it's going over here, things that normally don't happen, you just know every time I swing, I'm going to get a kill. And that, and it's, you don't always have that, but when those games happen, you can count them on one hand. I mean, through my entire career, right? And I
Sure.
remember like 3 of them, ever. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and you do. You talk about immersion in the now and trying to be in the moment. You know, Joe, you talk about making that mistake and erasing it right away to get on to that next moment. Very important in our quest to reach the top of our game. And Coach Blair, as you talk about those moments, you wonder about what's happening in an individual's life during that time.
Right.
Are they in a good place with family? Are they in a good place with relationships? Are they in a good place with rest? How are they coping, managing the stresses that come with being an elite athlete? I mean,
Right.
here we're talking about each and every athlete, but certainly it lends better, I think, to our audience when we talk about elite performers, people at the top of their game. I mean, just saw last night, right? University of Auburn win their 18th straight against a very hot Alabama team. What makes that? How do they sustain
Right.
this kind of level of competition? And Joe, you talk about expectation, and then I started to think, okay, well, yeah, personal expectation, coach's expectation, parents' expectation, significant other, either again AAU, varying
Right.
club coaches, advisors, consultants. I mean, so many people are involved in young athletes' lives when it comes to their potential, their promise, to reach higher levels. So expectation is a good way, I think, to start. When we think about some of the components, I mean, quiet mind, loose body, level emotion, right? We have these goals. We often talk about goals and motivation and in sports psych, and it's no different, right? All of these components are tied together when we're on this quest for peak performance. And that being said, going right back to our initial statement here, we all understand that it is continuous improvement. It is this great Japanese concept, term of Kaizen. And we know that we can get a little better. Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People talks about sharpening your saw. We want to see people always understanding and being well aware of their strengths and their areas for improvement. And when we're working on our game, putting the work in, which, by the way, is not just a cliche, right? It's certainly part of reaching peak performance. We want to see people working on their areas for improvement. But as Covey says, we also want them to sharpen what they do well. You can always do it a little better.
Yeah, I think peak performance makes me think back in my own experience. We had a run at Penn State where we didn't lose for a while. And it was like, everybody asked about the target on our back. They asked us that every week. How do you feel? The target's on your back. You haven't lost in X amount of games. Do you think about that loss? And we didn't ever think about losing because, I've said this before, it was like a constant pursuit of excellence is what I would say in the gym. It always trying to excel and get better, and that improvement every day never made us feel like we were there yet. So it was just like constantly trying to get better. And then I remember later on, it had been like, a year and a half or something that we hadn't dropped a set. And it was just it was fun. It was loose. It was, we were at the national championship game and we always used to switch jerseys. And so people would take pictures and think we were different people and the lineup was all messed up. And, all these different, we always did stuff like that. And so it was loose and it was fun and we were trying new plays all the time. It was just innovative, I guess, is another way to put it.
Well, it lends itself to team culture, and you often speak of your
Right.
coach who initiated or led, if you will, that culture,
Yeah.
and then it was embraced by you and your teammates. That's
Yeah.
excellent. That's excellent. If we maybe we can move into, we talk about takeaways. we have this many minutes to speak to the folks. So, beyond expectation, another component might be.
Ooh, I didn't know that was coming to me.
Right. What about motivation? Because I think we got to talk about motivation if we're talking about peak performance.
I think so too.
Don't you?
Yes.
Don't you think they kind of go together?
Yeah.
So are you, when you're working with your athletes, are you thinking about what motivates them, or is it something that you feel like they're already motivated if they're an elite performer? Or do they even know? Because I would say I didn't even know until I was halfway, at least, through college, what my real motivation was, other than being a part of the team.
That's interesting you say that, and you.
I just asked 17 questions
No,
about
I
the
was trying to figure out where to go with that one. I was trying to unpack it.
motivation.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
but we've talked, and you've talked a little bit about this, Coach Blair, when we think about, victory, and of
Mhm.
course we're all after self-improvement. We're all after success as we understand it in the win and loss column, and then how do we measure that success? Again, these are a lot of different aspects, smaller aspects of the same conversation, but I think it's important to understand our motivation.
Yeah.
What motivation, what's burning inside, where are we and where do we want to be?
Mhm.
And we often ask a question in a sports psych class, talk about the people who have been most influential in your life, who has motivated you to be where you are today. So I think that there are significant people that help us stay motivated. Who are we trying to please? What are we trying to accomplish? I think that's important for everyone to really take a close look at, because it's going to be unique. It's going to be different for all individuals.
How can coaches find their athletes' motivation?
I don't think
Find
they.
out what it is.
Oh, find out what it is.
Mhm.
I was going to say, I think the first, before rudely interrupting you,
No.
I don't think you can find someone's.
Their
You can
intrinsic.
definitely identify it and see
Mhm.
what gets that specific athlete. I think that's one of the true skills of coaching is understanding your player, and that's
Mhm.
why I will always say, at least my personal coaching philosophy is coaching is first relationship based. I don't think that that's some novel idea. I think that's something that you guys probably have both employed in your own coaching careers. But in terms of what can you do as a coach to get your athlete motivated,
Mhm.
there's tricks, but you can't swing the racket for them.
Right.
You can't get them to practice. You can't get the parents to get him or her to practice, right? If you don't want it fundamentally, and I think this has been my biggest struggle in my coaching career, is when you're coaching for money in law school, right?
Mm.
You got to deal with the parent who wants it more than the kid.
That's
Well, if the
really
kid
tough.
doesn't want it, then why am I wasting my time? And I don't mean that in a mean way to the parents, because a lot, Coach, the first episode I ever was on, you talked about the parents as the first real coach, and I think that's you are, whether we like it or not, we're very much our
Products of
parents'
our
children's nice children. But in the end, if you're at 15, 16 years old and you don't have the motivation, and you've
Mhm.
spent enough time, because we're playing sports earlier and earlier in our society these days, it's not on the coach to figure it out.
Yeah.
I don't mean to sound negative in that realm. I just think that in the end, as an athlete, the athlete needs to take ownership of it, and that motivation has to be so internal.
Mhm. I definitely agree with you at the elite level, because I think when you hit that level, a lot of the ownership needs to go to the athlete, because so much, I remember watching Tom Brady did like a Facebook watch, and I'm sorry to say Tom Brady, I know we're in Buffalo, but
Yeah.
but I watched him, and it was fascinating to watch him train. And in one of the episodes, he's training his arm swing, and he'll throw a ball, and then he'll say it was like a centimeter off. So then he'll do 100 more, to throw, until it's perfect. And you don't get that level of elite performer unless I think you have that within yourself, and somebody doesn't have to pull it out of you. They can just you know, be witness to it and assist you in your coaching. But I think in younger, in different levels, I think you probably can motivate them maybe with the team aspect. Like the team cohesion, the buy-in, people talk about a great team culture. I think you might have athletes who maybe on their own wouldn't get that into it and wouldn't be that motivated, but because the team's really excited about it, they'll kind of hang on and go for the ride. I don't know, maybe
Yeah.
that's wrong.
No,
but
no,
that's,
I think that's right.
I think that's right too. And as you're talking, role clarification comes to mind. I mean, we have to help young athletes define, you know, who they are on the team, what their role is, and
Right.
perhaps if you know any clarity in that regard is going to help people bring focus to what they do. And in other words, again, they have perceptions of who they are as a performer, who they are as a player. Coach has perhaps a different perception on who they are and what their skill set is. So that communication, that relationship, again, it's therapeutic in nature. It has to be you know, filled with trustworthiness, and it has to be there has to be some clear and concise expectation. And you talked about constant and you talk about
pursuit of
consistency a
excellence.
lot. You know, you and
Which
all,
is really hard in coaching, but you have to be, you're the CEO. Like, you've got to be the one who's there saying, this is the level we need to, you know, this is the level that we want to be at. This is the level we've got to work. This is the level we've got to work. And there are days as coaches that we're going to be tired and we don't want to police it, but you have
Right.
to, because one practice where things go into mediocrity and people get comfortable, then you've got to rebuild that back up, and you've got to, you know, that's not where we want to be. We want to be here. And I think from a coaching standpoint, that was always the hardest for me. It's exhausting, right? And until the team gets it, and sometimes it takes a little while for them to understand the different levels that they are capable of, and when they slide back and when they don't, when they've got like a great practice. And once that happens, then the ownership can become a part of the team. You know, we didn't do our best today, and then from a coaching standpoint, you're like, yes, they get it, they see it, they feel it, right?
Right.
And then you don't have to police it as much, obviously. But when you're building that culture and you want that to be a peak performance type of culture, I think early on the coaches have to take on a lot of responsibility in that sort of policing mentality constantly, right?
Well said, Coach. And a little bit of what you were talking about sounds to me like this idea of momentum in the midst of a performance, right?
Right.
We have momentum, and we let that momentum go away for whatever reason.
Yeah.
We think we're leading enough, so this game is over
Right.
before it's over.
Right.
And you know,
Those are
can
always the heartbreakers, right?
Sure, because most times I'll venture to say most times you can't get back there.
Right.
You let that go, you can't get back there. So it's
Well, then you create a stop for yourself because
Yeah.
you think you couldn't push through that boundary because you didn't the last time, right? You see that a lot in like team organized sports.
yeah. Well, that's an awesome coaching point, and when we make those points to the team or to the individual, that's the other part of this dynamic, right? We're motivating, building a culture, motivating the team as a whole, but we also have the responsibility of however many, if it's 15 individuals, if it's 25 individuals, depending on the sport, to motivate each and every one of those individuals. Maybe we can talk about that a little more. What do we do as coaches to ensure that at least there's a consistent effort to understand each and every individual? What kind of tactics, what kind of an approach as a coach? And I know one of them is individual meetings.
I was just gonna say we did weekly meetings to get to
Yeah.
know our athletes a
Now,
little bit more in depth.
now
the whole
you set
person.
those up, off, away from practice time, depending
My
on their
office.
schedule time and so forth. So that was a must, which is important,
And sometimes not talk about the game.
right?
Sometimes talk about school. Sometimes talk about what's going on in your life. You know, how are things? Just
Yeah.
get to know them as people. Sometimes they'll tell you like what their favorite show is, and you also like that show. And it, you know,
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
also humanizing your coach
Yes.
to not be this scary.
Yeah.
Because in practice, I would say I was intense. But there's also, a non-volleyball side of me that is much more conversational
Right.
than intense, right? So it's good for them to see that you're human and that, they can relate to you on more than one level of just volleyball.
And I think to jump off of that, I think the coaches that I have always appreciated the most were the ones who they knew their stuff on the tennis court, 100%.
Mhm.
That it's a given. You expect
Respect,
if
right.
you're, they're the only way that I'm going to become a peak performer is by having elite coaching. There's mutual respect there. But it was the coaches who I was able to form connections with. And I think of, my assistant coaches in college who it was their job to get to know us on a personal level. And these guys are
Mhm.
making, under $25,000 a year to babysit me. And not only
Make sure you go to class.
but they loved it.
Might be
and
different at Davidson.
no, we went to every class, baby. Oh my
Just
gosh.
kidding.
Yeah, it was. Did you get it? It wasn't. Hey, did you get to bed when did you get to bed? It's did you get to bed last night? Please get some sleep tonight.
Right.
Please go eat well. Don't eat
I mean,
pizza tonight.
so you can talk about peak performance not only from an athletic standpoint, but also from an academic standpoint. I mean, this goes across all different kinds of things, right?
Sure.
So, and then balancing those because that's what people are doing.
Yeah.
It's true. Habits of mind.
Yeah. So you're using the same habits probably.
Yeah, and I think it's, I guess I was never a full-time assistant coach for all that long, but, the relationships that I continue to have with the guys that I coached, and more specifically with the coaches that I have, I mean, I call my assistant coach from my freshman year once a week,
Wow.
and he was, I don't know if it was I was just looking for an older brother and he was the first person, but it was, he was the first person I thought to invite to the wedding beyond like my teammates and my family.
Right.
And it's like that type of stuff. And I know I will bring this back to peak performance, but it's when you feel like you have the support of the community around you, whether it's your coaches or your teammates or the administrators, right? If we're talking from a college athlete perspective, and it goes so far to make you feel safe and comfortable. And I don't have to worry about my thesis. I don't have to worry about, I remember my mom calling my head coach when I was, he noticed something was wrong with me. He didn't know. My mom's like, his grandpa's sick.
Right.
And my coach, completely blew me away one day when he was like, hey, my head coach, Drew, he was like, hey, are you all right? And I was like, I think I'm fine. I'm 20 I'm indestructible.
Right,
I got
exactly.
a steel chest plate,
Yeah.
whatever. And he's like, I heard your grandpa's sick. That's not wearing on you. And I'm like, and now it came from my mom, my first coach.
Yeah.
But, it was that recognition that made me step back and be like, oh my gosh. And then I had a great end of the season because I kind of was able to put everything in perspective and realize, well, I wasn't just hitting tennis balls for this guy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
we
you
still have a good
cares.
relationship to
Cares
this day.
about me, right?
And that's, I think that personally as an athlete, I needed those relationships. In the same way I need in the professional world. I know that I do my best work as an attorney
Right.
when I respect the guys and gals that I work for, but also we can go have lunch and not talk anything about the deals we're working on or, the NIL stuff for the NCAA, and we can talk about, Davidson playing Banas or, the Bills game or how are your kids doing or like I'm thinking about going skiing. You know what I
Right.
mean? Just like that type of stuff. This small talk, quote unquote small talk, I think is, at least personally, was some of the most important conversations and dialogues that I had with my coaches and my mentors and bosses because it showed that we had shared value systems and it wasn't just a transactional relationship. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, it makes
Yes.
a lot of sense. It's critical.
My mom told me that right when I had my first kid. She
Yeah.
said she was leaving. She came to help, and I was like, "You can't leave me here with this baby." Like she knew how to do everything, right? And she said, "Blair, you just have to care about him." Or it was her. You
Yeah.
just have to care about her, and everything else falls into place. And she was so right, Mom. You're so right.
Yeah.
She always is.
It's on camera too, by the way.
Right?
That's awesome.
She knows, but I feel the same way about coaching. You just have to care about
You
them.
do.
And if you care about them, everything else falls into place.
The great Eddie Sutton taught me something at a coaching clinic once, and he said, sometimes you really get after someone in a day, and
Right.
you rip at them,
Yes.
and
It's not all sunshine.
yeah. So, but he said, before midnight, I would find my way to them to remind them that I love them, of that day.
Yeah.
So it was really important. I think to your point, to both
Yeah.
of your points. I want to share in my coaching experience. There's a couple moments when I've had elite performers, and I'm not so sure I did the great job for that particular athlete, because I recall clearly moments where, because you have so much trust, confidence in that peak performer, so you give them the authority, if you will, to make decisions, to carry forward, and that's a good thing because they're prepared for it. But when, coach, is it your time to make sure they don't overstep, or make sure that you're nurturing their greatness to take it to another level?
Yeah.
And I know that I didn't always do that. I felt like I didn't always bring that elite athlete to one more level. I mean, yeah, a positive relationship, productive on the statistics side as a team.
Yeah.
The culture was good. They were humble in their own way. They're the best they could be. But I often felt like I don't know if I'm doing the best for them. So I would love to hear from coaches when they have the unicorn, as they say. Giannis here. There was a big Sports Illustrated headline, how to coach a unicorn.
Right.
And it's not supposed to be easy, but there certainly are some. It's a high level responsibility for the coach to make sure that you challenge.
You're challenging them all the time.
Yeah.
Isn't, by the way, before you answer that, I'm going to give you a couple seconds to get the
I know.
absolute perfect answer to this.
No.
Isn't that the whole coaching dilemma? Isn't that why coaching, among many
Exists.
other reasons, is so hard?
I
Coaching is so hard. And I think the challenge is the reason why the three of us sit in here and we, share our experiences, because it is this constant puzzle that
Also why we're all attracted to it, probably.
Yeah,
because
it's
constantly trying to maneuver to make things better, right?
Lost in it.
Yes.
You can sweat your way through it, but in the end, like I said before, I can't go out and hit outside, or I can't go, I can't dribble the ball up the court, run the fast break, and I definitely can't hit that serve for you.
Yes.
But I can give you everything I can, and sometimes the best thing you can do is not say something, right?
Yeah.
It's true.
So how do you coach the unicorn? Coach Blair, I've given you more than enough time. I've stalled long enough. And make sure you give me about 2 minutes.
That's good.
I think for me, we've had this happen, camps, I think of especially, when you have a whole camp and then you have a couple young athletes that are elite level and you need to give them sort of a better coaching experience. And there's an intensity to it. And, I say intensity, but it's almost like a obsessive intensity for me when I get there as a coach, and it's probably too much for an athlete. It's probably unhealthy, but it's like I want them to meet me there in that place mentally. So I want them to understand that I see something within them that they might not see. And I have that conversation in the beginning, because we're going to butt heads probably initially, because you're going to say, I'm doing everything you can, or I can, right? And I'm going to say, I know that, but you don't know what you can do yet.
Right.
And I see that. And so that conversation initially kind of starts the process of, we're going to build, we're going to get better, and you're going to get to another level that you don't know exists yet. But it's not an easy road.
Right.
So if you want to go there with me, we're going to go there, but here's my expectation, and this is what you're going to bring in every day. And if you don't bring it in, I'm going to let you know that.
Right.
And so that conversation, I think that expectation of the level of intensity that it's going to have, but then I think 90% of it's mental. you know, you're helping them with the sides of the game that are not physical anymore, because you're assuming that these people are physically, they get it. They know how to swing, they know how to shoot. That's why you see them as an elite performer. But what a lot of young elite performers don't have is, we say, volleyball IQ, right? They need to learn the game. They need to understand how they can make the team better. It's that side of it that I think takes them from here to like elite level performer. Does that make any sense?
It does. And
Okay.
that conversation about, look.
Was that good enough for the?
No, you bought me the time. And
Yeah.
Coach, you go ahead. I can absolutely respond to it.
Yeah, no, please do. I'm just saying, you're right. That early conversation, look, it's not easy. It's not supposed to be easy.
Yeah.
And we will not agree.
Yeah. Oh,
And
I
that's
had
okay.
a softball coach tell me this at 9 years old.
Wow.
It was intense.
Wow, look at that. Reflect right back to 9, Coach.
9 years old, softball.
Wow.
I remember it. Like, I specifically remember it and saying, that gave me a weird level of confidence. That, like, such a young female athlete to be like, oh, I could be a good athlete? That's cool. You know?
Yeah.
And, like, that started a lifetime of sport.
Yeah, on that exact point, my dad will always point to, there was a summer where we had up, training in Williamsville. They separated the boys from the girls. We had our guys' average age was probably 13, 14. Girls were older, better, more accomplished. They put us with Buffalo firefighter, Ross Wachiku, made us stand at attention before every practice. Stand at attention, like we were soldiers, like we were literally in boot camp.
Wow.
Start off running sprints. He never took his foot off the gas for 3 months that summer. My dad will say over and over again, that was a summer where you became a real athlete, because Ross set the expectation, and if you didn't meet him there, you were going to hear about it. And
Learned how to train.
if you did,
Yeah.
if you did meet him there, there was no pat on the back. It was, you're meeting my expectations.
Yeah.
And I always think, had I not had somebody like that who taught you and us as a group, and I mean, look, there were probably 3 of us out of the 16 boys that trained with them that summer that really were able to find that other gear.
Right.
But it was about, all right, you need to have trust and respect for that person driving the ship, and at some point, it's out of your hands. You're going through the motions at practice, you're participating in the practices, whether you
Right.
go through the motions or you actually buy in. And I
Right.
think when you,
It's that mental side, right?
it's completely mental. So by the time you
Right.
get to an elite level, Division I college sports or whatever, it doesn't matter. When you're playing
College sports,
post high
yeah.
school or high level juniors or in the pros, you expect your coaches to be able to set the tone for you. And I think that it goes, forgive me if I sound like a broken record, but it goes back to trust, respect, and that only comes out of a relationship. Because you as a 18-year-old or 21-year-old peak performer, you think you know everything, but you need to kind of check that ego. And I think it's the
Yeah.
coach's job to do that and say, look, we may not get along, but you need to at least trust me that I've gotten to this position. I've had the experience that is going to get you to be where I know that you can be, not just where you think you can be.
Right.
And there's got to be buy-in, and there's got to be some sacrifice, and there's got to be a heck of a lot of trust on the athlete's part to say, all right, coach knows what's right. And as you said, coach, when you prompted it, when do you kind of give that person the reins? I think, upon them showing that they respect and meet have a proven track record of respecting your expectations, respecting your process, and constantly meeting them. Not necessarily performing at a peak level all the time, but showing the buy-in
Right.
day in and day out, or season in and season out in some cases.
Joe, you brought it home, buddy. That was excellent. That was really excellent.
So I'm coming back every month, David.
Yeah, you know what? I couldn't help thinking about discipline as you were
Yeah.
talking. I mean, that's it. The expectation and being disciplined as the individual, but as the coach and in the culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very good summation.
And I think, I know you cite a lot of books on the podcast, Coach, so I'm going to get mine in. I read, there's 2 coaching books. Not they're memoirs more than anything, but Phil Jackson's first book, Sacred Hoops, is an
Yes.
amazing book that just kind of breaks down, because when I was answering that question, I think the athlete has to respect who you are as a person, which is something we talked about previously.
Right.
And Phil had to go through his own journey of finding who he was. He was the Zen master, but he was raised a Pentecostal Christian in northern Minnesota, I believe. Was it Minnesota or Montana? I forget. But he came into Zen practice because he realized that he's like, I need to think less, not think more, and he translated that mindfulness practice and his love for literature, and he would give his guys books, and he was sharing a piece of who he was with his players. And the other book that I in the tennis realm that I think is amazing, the best tennis book ever is Andre Agassi's autobiography. Open, read it. But his coach Brad Gilbert wrote a book. His first book was called Winning Ugly, which is kind of on like mentality as a player. But he wrote another book, a lesser known book called I've Got Your Back. And it's his like lessons from his coaching career, which all boil down to every player I ever worked with knew at the, no matter
the core,
whether we were drinking beers after, celebrating post-tournament. Brad Gilbert was like a big Coors Ice guy. That's why, again, not a plug. We're not sponsored by Coors yet.
I was just gonna say.
Sorry, we need to keep the. But
we're gonna have Coors on the table
right?
next to it next time.
We're slowly trying to work our NIL deals, right? Or when you have a disagreement with the player, there was never a question in the player's mind and in the coach's mind that Brad had his players back, and that's why so many guys like playing for Brad. It wasn't that he was the greatest player ever, but he was one of the best coaches of all time because of who he was and how he put his heart into everything he did as a coach. And I think that if that's what you're doing as a coach, no matter if you're, coaching 7-year-old t-ball or travel team, or you're coaching, an elite athlete at the highest part of the game with millions of dollars in sponsorship, if that athlete knows at his or her core that you are giving him or her everything you have and your love and attention, and you're giving them everything you have, you always have their back.
Can't go wrong.
Yeah.
That's a great testament, and I think a great way to close.
Yeah.
Folks, Joe, thanks again for wrapping it up so nicely. That is at the core. You just explained, you just expressed heart as a coach, and it is at the core of a successful experience on and off the field. So great job, folks. Thanks for being here. WNY Coaches Chalk Talk, signing off.